Good afternoon, and I guess for those of you on the East Coast, good evening. My name is Ken Randall, and along with my co-host, Kellye Testy, we're delighted to welcome you to the second installment of Live with Kellye and Ken. I'm a former law school dean, as is Kellye, and I'm currently the president of a group called iLaw, which is a distance education partner to law schools nationally, and iLaw is now part of BARBRI's comprehensive services, solutions, and innovations for law schools. Dean Testy and I have created this monthly live series for law school deans, professors, directors, and law students called Live with Kellye and Ken, where we explore the most important pressing issues and opportunities facing legal education today. We had our first webinar this past summer in August at the SEALS meeting, where Kellye and I discussed the ABA action that the House of Delegates took on various ABA standards. And our next webinar will be on Monday, November 5th, and I believe we already have signed up to join us two deans, Erwin Chemerinsky and Doug Sylvester. But for today, Kellye will facilitate a discussion with four leading law school deans, and probably Kellye needs very little introduction. She's a former law school dean, former president of the American Association of Law Schools, and currently the president and CEO of LSAC. Kellye Testy.
Appreciate you all tuning in. I want to say a special thanks to the four deans who have joined us today. We have Dean Mark Alexander from Villanova, Dean Heather Gerken from Yale, Dean Jennifer Mnookin from UCLA, and Dean Blake Morant from George Washington. And I really appreciate those colleagues joining us. This is the season of law school forums, when we're all around the country letting potential candidates know about the opportunity of legal education. We just finished a wonderful forum in Chicago this weekend where our attendance was up over 27% over last year. And we wanted to make sure that all candidates had an opportunity to hear directly from deans, even if they aren't able to attend a forum this year. So I really appreciate, colleagues, you joining me so that we can help candidates understand how to make the most of their enrollment journey and why now is a very good time to go to law school. So thank you, deans, for joining us and presenting this opportunity for candidates. I want to start right away with asking the first question, and that is, why, in the view of the deans, is this a good time to go to law school? Many candidates are considering that opportunity and are eager to hear the opportunities that are out there for the profession right now.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
I'm getting a little bit of echo, but it's not quite as Star Trek as what we just heard. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
It is.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you, first of all, for having me, and thank you for these opportunities to talk to law students who are considering the application process. I think it's a terrific time to go to law school, and I mean, it's true, I'm a law school dean, so on the one hand, I probably think that any time is a terrific time to go to law school, but I think especially now, and some of the reasons for that are because law and civil society and democracy are so clearly in the news. There's been an extensive period of time where I think a lot of us took the undergirding of our system somewhat for granted. Not necessarily lawyers, but lots of college graduates and other young people took those things for granted. And we're in a moment right now where a lot of that feels up for grabs. And so it makes very clear how law and regulation and judges and lawyers undergird what we do, how we think, and the range of the possible. And fundamentally, law school trains problem solvers. It trains sophisticated problem solvers. And I think this is a time when we need as many sophisticated problem solvers as we can possibly find.
Indeed. I really appreciate the question. Let me move over to Dean Gerken from Yale, and we'd love for you to join us and give your reflections on your opinion about why now is a good time to go to law school.
All hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Very well.
So I wanted to just second everything that Dean Mnookin just said. I say that what our democracy needs now is people who are trained in the values of our profession. And to me, there are two. The first is that we defend the rule of law. So I just want to say to all those college students there, do you remember that image of people streaming into the airports the night the travel ban was first put in place? And what you probably remember most was the role that lawyers played in protecting people who had been swept up in an unconstitutional ban. I'm very proud to say that all those lawyers we're relying on were drafted in part by our students. I'm proud to say that at one moment that night, a law student in our law school clinic actually helped pull a plane off the tarmac at JFK that night. So just imagine that. As a lawyer and as a law student, you could be doing that crucial work to defend the rule of law. It's important now, it's important everywhere, and it's part of the core role of our profession. And the second thing that our profession does, which is desperately needed at this moment, is it's able to look past its own arguments and to recognize what's honorable in the arguments on the other side. And right now, we are having a really hard time in this country talking to one another because we aren't trained the way lawyers are trained. Lawyers are trained to know the weaknesses in their own arguments, strengths in the arguments of others, which leads to a level of respect and an ability to engage with people across party lines. Those are the skills we teach in law school, and that's why you should come to law school.
Bridge building capacity is really needed. I want to move to getting the views from Dean Morant at George Washington. And as we do that, I want to thank our viewers for a little patience as we connect all of the deans. As you all know, busy deans are always all over the U.S. working hard for their schools and for the law. And so I really appreciate that patience as we connect people from many different places. Dean Morant, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dean Testy, President Testy, also Dean Randall. It's a pleasure to be with all these wonderful deans discussing a topic that I've talked about really all over the world, and that is, why is it good to go to law school right now? And you've already heard from Dean Gerken and also Dean Mnookin, who've given some wonderful reasons for that. I'd like to add to that the idea that now we are living in a very global and complex democracy and market. So if you think about it, we're all interconnected now, regardless of what you hear from other individuals, either by technology or whatever. And the market is constantly changing, and it is producing new opportunities all the time. But the one constant through all of that the one constant I should say through all of that is this idea that individuals who have good problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, novel ways of really adapting to new situations, being able to coalesce facts from a variety of different perspectives, that is a constant, I think, ingredient that will go with whatever jobs come up in the future. That is what legal education provides to individuals, that ability to think critically, to really problem solve in a very unique way, and to utilize those talents in order to take advantage of opportunities as they come. So one of the things that our listeners should pay attention to is this idea of an arc of a career, that over the course of your lifetime, there are going to be many opportunities that have come before you, either within law or in business or some other. A law degree gives you the skills that you need in order to optimize those particular opportunities. And if I could close with this, one of the things that I find very fascinating when I talk with lawyers who are practicing or in business is this idea that a law degree gives them the ability to not only enrich themselves and help their clients, but it also gives them the opportunity to give back to their communities in a number of different ways, which is the historic function of lawyers, finding ways to enrich the societies in which they're in. And there are countless examples of lawyers all over the country who either have gone for elective office, who have adopted inner city schools, who have volunteered their services, as Dean Gerken said, to individuals who can't afford representation when their rights are being threatened. Those kinds of altruistic opportunities are what lawyers are able to do beyond just representing their clients. So this is a wonderful time for an individual to be legally trained. And certainly there's no better time than now that we need these individuals in our society.
Dean Morant, and so many candidates who are interested in attending law school right now are, of course, rightly concerned about what is the market for the legal profession like? You know, what are areas that are hot right now in terms of opportunity, and how do the deans assess the market opportunities for those who are pursuing legal education right now? So let me begin with Dean Gerken to hear her views on that, and I'll move from there to Dean Morant and then Dean Mnookin and back to Pennsylvania to Dean Alexander. So thank you very much for addressing that question about the professional opportunities.
So I would say one of the things that has really struck me, having been on the road, having spoken to about 3,000 alums in the last year, is that the path of the law is so varied. There are many, many paths when you want to be a lawyer. And I think what people don't realize is exactly what Dean Mnookin said. Lawyers, problem solvers are helpful everywhere. So we see our grads using RJD just like an MBA and moving into banking, moving into starting companies, moving into running agencies. It's astonishing how varied the careers of our graduates are. And I think it's a very simple reason. It's a problem-solving degree. It's a highly analytic degree that teaches you how to think, teaches you how to question everything, to break down problems. There's just a way in which there are very few degrees that allow you to do so many things with them. So I think that your graduates should remember, it isn't just one path after law school. There are many, many paths after law school. And this is an all-purpose degree that serves many different purposes.
Let's go out to Dean Mnookin in California.
Hear me?
Yes.
I would second everything that Dean Gerken said. I think that one of the significant attractions of a law degree is just how flexible it can be to help our graduates pursue an enormous variety of opportunities. And I'm also struck, as I meet so many of our alums, to reiterate a point that Dean Morant made, that over the arc of a career, people's direction and opportunity change, that there's plenty of people who start in one area, and the old model of going to one job or one law firm and staying there forever is going to apply to very, very few people. And so there's lots of chances to build and re-engage with a new toolkit. And one of the things law school does is gives you the resources to be able to do that. That said, I'll mention a few areas that we are seeing increased opportunity in. And in a way, it reflects what's going on in our country. So to name just a few that we're seeing a great deal of, we are seeing a lot of tech-related opportunities, broadly speaking, that ranges from intellectual property practice to privacy to cybersecurity. I mean, cybersecurity wasn't even a field. I know one professor who, when they first wanted to teach in it, their law schools, you know, the dean scratched his head and said, cyber what? And now it's an incredibly hot area with a lot of opportunities. Here in California, we're seeing a lot of interest in immigration and environmental areas, both on the public interest side, but also on the private side. We're also seeing a very significant growth in cannabis-related law. So, I mean, that's another example of how current issues in public policy immediately translate into a slate of opportunities around regulation, policymaking, problem solving on both the transactional side and otherwise. There's a lot more examples I could give, but I think the real thing to take away is that if you look around at what kinds of problems society is grappling with, both on the business side of things and in the public interest side of things, you're going to see increased opportunities for legal thinking and legal problem solving in relation to those.
Thank you, Dean. I'd like to move to Dean Morant for his views on this, and that in doing that, I want to note that there's no problem really that there isn't a legal dimension for. And one of the things I know that so many graduates enjoy is that law provides the opportunity for constant renewal, many different areas that one can work in the course of a career. Dean Morant, your thoughts there from DC about opportunities for graduates of law schools?
Well, thank you so very much. And following behind Dean Gerken and Dean Mnookin, whose ideas not only I agree with, but they've summed them up so cogently, I'd like to build on them a little bit. And that is to say that if you look at a thread that goes through all of the opportunities that are out there today, most employers tell me they really want individuals who are very good professionals. Individuals who are not only competent in what they do in terms of the knowledge base that they have in that discipline, but also appreciate the skill level that's necessary in order to get people to talk with you, that you're comfortable with talking with a variety of different people, that you're able to work collaboratively with a number of different people. And those kind of professional skills are really integral to a very successful legal career, which is why individuals going to law school today will get that, which is going to be ubiquitous regardless of whatever profession they take. In terms of hot areas, I was so glad to hear Dean Mnookin talk about cybersecurity, because that also folds into national security, which has been a huge area that we've seen as a growth area for many students who are applying to law schools, particularly when it has to do with governmental affairs. I'd also like to say transactional work has really kept up in a lot of different ways, both internationally as well as domestically. And we're getting a lot of students who are interested in being able to be on the front lines of being able to not only to negotiate deals, but also to figure out how we do the problem solving notion within a cooperative when you're dealing with a number of different people. And that translates across a number of different fields. Let me add to the list energy. And energy has been a huge factor, along with environment, that we're seeing an uptick with. And as you know, energy in the traditional sense has a number of different permutations to it, both with fossil fuels, which are really now taking a back seat to the more sustainable, environmentally friendly energy sources, which are growing by leaps and bounds. And so when you put energy together with environment, we're seeing a huge groundswell of interest as well as jobs in that area as well. So I think capitalizing on what you were saying, Dean Testy, the law degree basically gives you the tools to morph with the opportunities that come in a very changing and dynamic global market.
Thank you, Dean Morant. And I want to move over to Dean Alexander. As I do that, I want to say just a word to all the law school candidates out there, because these areas are so exciting, but I also want to make sure you know you don't have to know exactly what you want to do when you start law school. It's fine to explore it, and law school helps you find your pathway to your passion in law. Dean Alexander, welcome back. What is your view about the opportunities that the market holds right now for law graduates?
The opportunities ahead are tremendous. I am very encouraged by what we're seeing in the law. The job market, we all know, after 2008, 2009, just generally took a downturn. But I think that first of all, economically speaking, very practically speaking, there are more job opportunities for students who are graduating from law school. I think also what's important is that we are seeing, and this is part of the conversations with my fellow deans, where we're seeing already, is there is, I think, a renewed understanding of why a law degree is important and what it can offer and what we can offer as leaders in society. So I think that means that not only are there traditional law jobs available, but we're in a position where we can talk about new and important fields to go into that aren't law specific, where we provide leadership in the corporate world, in the government world, in the nonprofit world. So I think that when you look ahead, if you are thinking of going to law school, when you look ahead 3 years, I think there's going to be far more job opportunities open up, both in traditional contexts of law firms, prosecutors, defense attorneys, et cetera, and in additional fields. So I think that the future is quite bright in all of the areas we've been talking about. Whether it's like work on immigration cases, and I know that Dean Gerken and her students were doing work. We were doing that work here in Philadelphia, all over the country. Lawyers were there. What we see in terms of the big public events, lawyers are there. And so whether it's public, private, whatever, I think there's many more opportunities ahead for lawyers in our society.
I want to now begin to explore a little bit what you're all looking for when you're inviting applicants to law school. I'll start with Dean Gerken, and I know that our candidates that are viewing today want to know how to put their best foot forward, and how is it that law schools are looking at applications, and what kind of candidates are you looking for each of your schools as you're reviewing those? So Dean Gerken, could you reflect on that a little while?
Sure. We have a holistic review when we look at applications, and our faculty actually read them all. So they really pay attention to your essays. They really pay attention to what you've done. I would say the thing that is overridingly important is someone who wants to engage in the project of law. Now, that may be that you want to do so intellectually and you want to be an academic. It may be that you have in your mind a mission of service, but they want to see some. We get a lot of generic applications that could just seem like cookie cutter applications. We want to know what it is that brought you to law school, not that would bring someone to law school. And I think that people get so nervous about presenting themselves that they think they need to put themselves into particular categories. And I just want to say, be authentic. I know that's a trope, but just be yourself and tell us what you're really thinking, because we will pay attention.
Dean Alexander, I'd like to move back to you to let us know at Villanova, as you're reviewing applications, what's your advice to law applicants?
We have a question fundamentally about why you want to be here and why it's going to matter to you. What's always important is for you to think to yourself why you want to go to law school. Of course, we're going to have our students, taking the LSAT, submitting their GPAs, and those are certainly measures which we take into account. But we really want to make sure that you are someone who wants to go to law school, and frankly, someone who wants to go to law school here. I believe that what we're doing is we're offering a legal education where we have values at the core of what we do. When we talked before about why it's important to be a lawyer, and I think about when we talk about what the natures of being a lawyer and the way we serve people, I want our students to think about that before they apply. And we're going to ask questions about that. And we're going to look at that as you provide your essays. And we also will do interviews of some students, and we want to hear about that. We also are looking at leadership as one of the key components of future lawyers. So we're going to ask you, what do you see in yourself as a future leader? So the questions we're looking for, of course, are the standard measures of academic excellence. And we're joined by just deans at such great law schools. We're all looking for excellent students. Those who go to law school, as a general matter, have performed so well over their academic careers. But I think there is a plus that always matters, is to think about why you want to be a lawyer, make sure we understand that. And also, what do you think about yourself in the context of being a lawyer and one who's going to be serving others and in leadership positions going forward?
Good advice. And Dean Mnookin, I'd like to turn to you. And one of the other things our candidates are often curious about is whether there's any one right major for law school applicants. And so I'd love for you to address that too as you give your remarks on what UCLA is looking for as it reviews applicants.
Really not one right major. And in fact, we give very serious consideration to students whose studies and work experience have been enormously varied. We do get a lot of applicants from traditional social sciences like political science and economics and history, but we get quite a few electrical engineering majors, many English majors, lots of, we get accountants, we get art historians. And I really think we're more interested in how seriously did they take the studies, what indicia of going deep can we find in their application, and how does what they studied connect to who they're becoming and how they think about the world. That's much, much more important to us than what the major is. We're really very, very ecumenical about that. I would add a couple of just general pieces of advice to extend the excellent advice that you've just heard. One is do your research. Don't stop at rankings or the obvious. Really spend some time to try to get to know a little bit more about these law schools. There are ineffable qualities, and you want to find the place where you will be able to reach your goals and where you will also flourish while you're there. I know the LSAC Law School forums are one great place to do that. There's lots of others, but it really is worth investing in learning a little bit more about these schools, and also applying to both some stretch possibilities and some relatively sure things if you're serious about going to law school. Don't take yourself out of contention just because your numbers don't hit a school's averages, but simultaneously don't get cocky about it just because they do. We really all do read holistically and look to build a holistic class. I'll also mention two other quick, just very practical points. One is proofread. I cannot tell you how many applications we get that have a why UCLA statement, only they say why Northwestern or why UVA, and you sort of, we don't rule somebody out for that kind of error, but it does. It doesn't look the best when that happens. And then also with letters of recommendation, go with people who really know you and can speak to you rather than just people who you think are fancier. We take much more seriously letters that really help us understand this candidate than we do just the name at the bottom of the page.
Thank you. These are great insights, Deans. And Dean Morant, I want to move to you to address this question as well. And as I do that, remind our candidates that fit really does matter. And I am always just amazed by all the great law schools that are out there and the wonderful programs that they have. So as the deans have noted, do your research and find that fit that's right for you. Dean Morant.
So this is the problem of following so many of my great colleagues who've taken all of my various points from me. I will just simply underscore a couple of things that have been said already to make sure that people understand this. And that is, I think Dean Gerken talked about being your authentic self. Never underestimate the statement that you submit with your application for a couple of reasons, not only with regard to its narrative about you, but also the way that you write it. Because one of the things, as I had mentioned in some of my previous commentary, is this idea that a ubiquitous skill that most people who go to law school develop is their ability to communicate, both orally and written. And so your very first foray into that is putting forward that statement. So I agree with Dean Mnookin so well with regard to proofreading, both in terms of making sure that you are addressing the individuals that you should be addressing when you're applying to law school, but also just proofreading the statement to make sure it reads well and that it puts your best foot forward. Let me also say one thing that it hasn't been said so far, and that is what I call the unusual applicant. Many times the paradigmatic candidate is someone who's just graduated from college. But very often I found individuals who have worked for a while or who are a little bit older also do well in law school. So I want any of the listeners who don't fit quite in the category of the recent graduate from college to not forego this opportunity. The life skills that you have developed as a result of the things that you've done can come in very handy in terms of not only shaping your perspective on law, but also what you'll contribute to the overall exercise in law school, because most law schools, as our universities, bring together a variety of different people with a variety of different perspectives, and you learn from that. So for those unusual candidates out there, I hope they keep that in mind as they think about applying to law school.
Dean Morant, really appreciate that. I'm also going to try and catch a few questions that are coming in through our chat here. And one of them is naturally a very sensible question, which is how to think about the cost of law school and advice that deans may have in considering that investment and what should be prudent for candidates to be thinking about. So I want to ask Dean Alexander, if I could, to begin with some reflections on the finances of law school and his recommendations to candidates as they negotiate that.
Sure, thank you. That is a great question. Of course, law school is a significant investment of time, energy, and money. What we all do is we try to make sure that a legal education is as affordable as possible. The reality is that over time, a law school degree does pay for itself. But I think that no matter what, whether you are thinking of a career that pays a very large amount or a small amount, you need to think, what it is that the education is worth to you personally, and then think about the options you have when you make your applications. Some schools may offer you a small, medium, or large scholarships, but you have to think to yourself, what is it worth to you? And then you have to say, all right, if that's the case, what am I going to sacrifice? How much do I want to spend? How much am I going to borrow, family, friends, banks, etc.? But I think you have to start with yourself and say, why am I going to law school? What is it worth to me? And I assume that everybody who's watching this and everyone who wants to go to law school has a reason for wanting to go to law school. So that inspires you, I think, in a way that really will make you an excellent student. But then I think, practically speaking, say to yourself, now what is it that I can practically spend in pursuing that degree? And what is the right place to go? Like Dean Mnookin was saying, don't just go to the school because it's one of the lists that happen to be in your range, but say what's really the best fit for me. And think about a school, and we are from 4 very different kinds of schools, and one will fit for you and another will not. But say, what's it worth to me in many ways, including the financial aspect. And in that context, I think choose wisely and work with the admissions team at that school to see what your scholarship options are.
Much. And I want to go to Dean Mnookin, who's leading one of our public law schools, and ask for her reflections on this. I also want to let the deans know, too, that as we move to next questions, a couple of things that have come up that I'll ask you to address are, how do you value work experience? Or how do you value people who may have an advanced degree already in another field, or those things that are plus factors? So Dean Mnookin, let's first hear from you out from public law school in California, please.
Thank you, Kellye. My public law school in California is definitely less expensive than many other law schools in our range, so to speak, but it's also an awful lot more expensive than it was a generation or two ago. There just is not the kind of public support for public law schools that there once was, and that's our reality. On the other hand, we continue to be a very public-minded law school, and one of the things that means for us is that we're very concerned about access to opportunity, as well as excellence. That means a few things. First of all, it means that we do give significant amounts of need-based financial aid. You could be the last person admitted to our law school off our wait list, and if you qualify for need-based financial aid, you could get up to about half of your law school tuition on that basis alone. We also do give scholarships based on a broader variety of characteristics, as do most law schools, but not all. Dean Gerken is at one that I think doesn't. There's only probably 3 in the country that don't. And so I would advise all of you to think about those balances when you're making your choice. It's quite possible that you will have some opportunities that will lead you to be less in debt than others. Whether it's worth going to a law school that in some ways you prefer, but that will cost you more, is a very personal decision. It depends on what you plan to do, how you expect to pay back those loans. Does that school have a loan forgiveness program of its own? How confident are you that you're going to have the kind of opportunity that you're looking for? And I don't think those questions can be answered in full. A law license it's still a monopolistic profession, and it gives you a set of opportunities that people without law degrees do not have. So you are getting, with this degree, this chance to do an incredible array of things. And as Dean Alexander said, there's a lot of evidence that law degrees absolutely do pay for themselves across a broad variety of areas. But I understand and hugely sympathize with the anxieties around the substantial expense that law school can be. And I think it is important to name that and to recognize it. And as a society, to ask if there's anything that we can do to help ameliorate it.
And that's a great segue. I want to ask Dean Gerken to talk a little bit about public service and public interest work, and how candidates who are interested in pursuing those lines of work might think about the financial impact of law school, because there are a number of options, at least now, and we hope when we think about public policy that continues. Dean Gerken.
It's a really great question. Everything that the prior deans just said to me. When you're thinking about public interest work, you want to think about a couple of things. First, you want to think about just what you're paying. We also have a needs blind system. We think it's very important, hard to keep our debt load ratio very low compared to our peers. You should think about scholarship on the back end. So there are some schools like ours that will forgive your loans over the years if you do public interest work. And I think that when I applied to law school, it occurred to me that someone would ever do such a thing. So it's a really wonderful. And then the third thing you should think about is what other resources are available for people who want to do public interest. So I am inordinately proud that we give out so many public interest fellowships. About 15% is able to work for free for a year at a public interest organization. That is a jump start into a public interest career like you can't get anywhere else. Different forms of support. You make a mistake if you just start with tuition dollars. You really need to look at all the pieces, not just what you get at the beginning, but the program and what kind of support the school provides for people who want to pursue a public interest.
I do want to remind all candidates that LSAC conducts dozens of forums in all major cities around the country, and the law schools are all there with the information both about finances, their own programs, and opportunities that they have. So that's a wonderful way to get to know more about all the schools. At each of those forums this year, we've added a dean's panel like this one, and so you can come and hear from deans there as well. I want to give the deans an opportunity now to talk just a little bit about themselves, since it is a rare opportunity to have them all with us. And one of the things that some of our listeners have wanted to know is, what do the deans themselves find inspiring about being in law today? In other words, what is it about your pathway and where you are now that keeps you inspired about being in law? And let me start with Dean Morant first, and then we'll ask each of the deans to comment upon that before we turn to other questions.
Well, thank you so much, Dean Testy, to talk about a subject that I think is probably number one among the questions that I get when I speak with prospective students. My own path has been a very varied one, and I think if we were to tie in a lot of the commentary that a lot of the students or listeners today would have heard, is this idea of the law degree and a legal training providing you the tools to do a variety of different opportunities that come before you. My career has probably been more varied than most. I had a military obligation when I went to law school, so I was an Army JAG officer for about 6.5 years. Worked as a government contract attorney for one of the #1 military installations in the country, honed those skills, did that with a law firm and also with the Transit Authority here in Washington, and then became a legal educator. And I think the thing that threads all of that together is the training that I received in law school that I was able to use in order to parlay opportunities as they arose. And this harkens back to a comment I think that was made by one of my fellow deans earlier. And this idea of not necessarily having a preconceived notion about what you're going to practice when you come out of law school. What you are trained to do when you go to law school is to think critically, think innovatively, to problem solve, and above all, to be able to coalesce a lot of your talents in order to maximize your opportunities. And if you look at my career, it's basically been one which has done just that. And the horizons are endless. And that's one of the things that I think makes this a very good investment. And if I might, from the last question that was raised about finances, and I think Dean Alexander said this, and I don't want the listeners to give it short shrift, and that is there are many, many studies which have demonstrated that over the course of a career, a law degree does pay for itself. It used to be years ago that when the job market was very explosive, that it paid for itself faster. But I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that the investment may not be worth it, because over the lifetime of a career, it truly is. And I'm sure you're going to find as you talk with other lawyers that they will give you the same kind of perspectives that I'm giving you, that over their careers, it has not only been worth it, but it's also been enriching, both from a professional standpoint as well as a personal one.
Morant. Dean Alexander, let me turn to you. And one of the best things I heard said once about a law degree is it's simply a license to help people. Once you have it, you can do that in any of the many ways that you may have passion for. So, Dean Alexander, tell us a little bit about your journey and what inspires you today.
Thank you so much, Dean Testy, and that certainly is accurate and really captures so much. You know, the license really is licensed to help people, and like Dean Morant, I didn't go straight from college to law school without my own bit of work in government and politics. I worked in the United States Senate, and that truly inspired me. My path is one where, going back to what you asked with Dean Mnookin, I actually majored in architecture. I don't think there's a lot of folks who major in architecture who go to law school, but I realized I had an interest in the law and government and service that was deep within me from my upbringing. And so I went and I worked for a few years, and that really made me understand that I really had a way in which the law and government spoke to me and spoke to me about my own family's history of service. I'm very, very proud that my family always instilled in me the value of service. And I found that there is a way in which the law itself, the study of it, spoke to me, and how we can serve other people speaks to me to this day. And that's why when I talk about law school, and I spoke about this before, when I always say to people that we need to put values at the core of a legal education, we all have our different values. They come from different places, but we all have values, and we have to find ways we can serve those values. And so to me, law school is endlessly exciting because it is a way we find our own fulfillment to serve. And that can come in so many different ways, but it is, to me personally, very fulfilling, very enjoyable. And when I think about just in the current events that we're experiencing right now, I'm just so glad to know that there's another generation of students coming through right now who are witnessing such significant events in our nation's history and realizing that they have a role to play. And it may be that they get involved in government, and maybe they do public service, and maybe they do corporate work, whatever they do, they see there is a role for lawyers in our society that is at the core of what we value. And that gets me excited every day.
Thank you, Dean Alexander. I want to turn now to Dean Gerken for her comments, and want to let all of you know too, who you may be first generation college grads and first generation professionals in your family. That's certainly my own pathway into law. And it's something that I want to encourage all of you to continue to pursue, because you can make a difference through law, and we need your voices. Dean Gerken, please share with us your thoughts on this.
So there are definitely no lawyers in my family, so it was all a little bit of a strange new world I was entering. But what I have loved about it is two things. So, thinking degree, and by that I mean ideas matter. Being able to write clearly matters. There's an art to writing a beautiful brief. There's an art to negotiating an amazing deal. All of these is your brain. So for all you nerds out there, it's a great place to be. But the other, you also do something. And I'll just say that, for me, it really came to me this summer. We had one of our clinics who had been separated at the border from their parents and had been moved to Connecticut. And worked their summer jobs during the day and worked on those papers in the evening, filed an emergency brief, got recognition for the first time, a constitutional right for parent and child in these cases. And the press conference for it, I went around the building and said to the staff, come out and watch the press conference, because this is why we do. And that's what I love about the job that we all have.
Mnookin, I'd like to hear from you now about your own pathway and your passion for the work you do.
I think I feel so lucky that I had the opportunities to go to law school and then become a professor and dean, even though that's not what most of our graduates will do. And part of it is because I get to see the extraordinary choices that our students make and the variety of differences that they make in their lives. And I get to enjoy being a piece of and a part of that. Two quick things. One is to actually go back to something that Dean Gerken said about public interest work. At UCLA, we have many, many students who go into, law firm practice at large firms and medium-sized firms, but we also have a very substantial number of students who go into public interest. And we even have an admissions program that's a specialized program for public interest, although we have many public interest students who are not part of that program. And it's widely known that Yale gives more of those postgraduate fellowships than any other law school. It may be not quite as well known that last year we gave the second most of those. And so it's a real institutional priority for us and actually throughout the UC system. And watching how those students go get a first opportunity that we've helped them have, and then nearly all of them end up in a permanent position, either in that same organization or something in the same field, is something that warms my heart. My path was through the academy mostly. I did take a little bit of time off before law school. And then I, in addition to law school, went and got a PhD in the history and sociology of science and technology. I was interested in the intersection of technology and law, and I became an evidence scholar. And what's been fun for me about what I get to do as a faculty member, a little bit less as dean because I don't have quite so much time for research and writing, is that I got to be a scholar and think deeply about ideas. I got to be in the classroom, hopefully to inspire students, certainly to be inspired by them. But I also got to write and think about issues that really matter. I've spent a good deal of time thinking about forensic science and some of the limitations and weaknesses in forensic science, and being part of broader coalitions with actually sometimes judges, but also lawyers, faculty members, and sometimes students to try to bring about concrete change in the world. So what lawyers get to do is both think deeply and actually make a difference in the day-to-day operation of our democracy. And that's a pretty powerful combination.
It's a really powerful combination. And I'm glad so many of you made the point that one of the things about law is it's not only that you care deeply about justice, but you have the tools to do something about it. And I know that's something that motivates so many of our candidates. Deans, you also mentioned how busy you all are, and I certainly know that, having been among you for 15 years myself. And I want to thank you again for the time you've taken today. Before we reach the end of our time, I did want to let, first of all, the audience know that we've had some questions come in around issues of whether the schools really do welcome students who are not right out of undergrad, if someone who's worked for quite a while is in fact welcome to apply. And I just want to make sure everyone knows that our schools do welcome applicants, whether right from undergraduate school, whether maybe worked for a couple of years in a fellowship, people who've been in the military, people who've worked for a number of years in a career. So really whatever your station in life, if this is your passion, we encourage you to apply. One of my favorite students ever was a doctor who graduated when he was 72. So there are many examples, but I know that our school is really eager to hear from you and understand who you are and what pathway that you want to follow in the law. So what I'd like to do now in closing is ask each of the deans to take a moment to give any final thoughts that they'd like to for candidates who are considering applying to law school, whether in this cycle or in a future cycle. And let me begin with Dean Alexander, and then we'll go through each of the deans.
Well, thank you so much to both of you and to your organizations for hosting this. I guess in closing, I probably would have started with other thoughts, but I think I would just reflect on the way things started. We had a problem when we got started, and something we had tested out the systems beforehand, and for some reason it didn't work. We had a problem, and I truly believe that because I am a lawyer, because of my training, I am able to sort through problems. I certainly don't have technical knowledge. We sorted through the problem and we dealt with it, and we're ready to keep moving forward. And I feel like that was just a little thing that happened today. But truly, my life as a lawyer is always, I'm thinking about how do we help people? How do we help solve problems and serve other people with problems? So, you know, it was a maybe not the way I expected to start, But I knew that we were going to make it through this problem because that's what I could do. I could help solve problems, and I could help ultimately have a chance to have a conversation with students who want to go to law school. So, to me, law school is always going to be there to help me. And frankly, to everybody who's paying attention right now, it's going to be there to help you. So with those few last words, I just want to say thanks for the time. And truly, law school is a great experience. And I hope that if anyone is interested, I'm always happy to talk to folks. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dean Alexander. What a great example. And Dean Morant, I turn to you now for your closing thoughts.
Thank you so much, Dean Testy and Dean Randall, for including me with this wonderful, illustrious panel. I feel like I've hit the mother lode in terms of the thought processes about the value of legal education here. Final thoughts. Let me just leave this. I see a number of comments coming in from applicants who have different profiles. I think one of the things that I'd like to leave the listeners with is this idea of how being legally trained is not only a benefit to you personally, but also to society in general. And there's a wonderful book written by David McCullough called John Adams. It's the biography of John Adams. If you haven't had a chance to read that, I seriously would advise it. I think HBO did a series on it at one point, which was excellent. But if you read the very beginning of the book, John Adams talks about why he decided to become a lawyer. And his father wanted him to go to Harvard to become a minister. And when John Adams started Harvard, he thought, I really don't want to do that. I think I'd rather be a teacher. But during the time that he was going, the fever in the country was really building toward establishing itself as a new democracy. And John Adams decided to become a lawyer for two reasons. Number one, he said, if I become a lawyer, I'll be able to make a living for my family. But at the same time, and this was the second reason that truly motivated him, was that he would have the skills, the requisite skills, to really enrich a fledgling and growing democracy. And if you look over the span of time of this country, many of the problem solvers, the change agents, the individuals who've made a big difference in our democracy have been individuals who are legally trained. For those out there who are thinking about this degree in a very broad way, one that will not only help them to realize their dreams, whether they are dreams they have now or opportunities that come, but are truly motivated by having a skill set that enables them to help the society and the people around them. There is no finer profession than the one that we're in right now. And I look forward to, as Dean Alexander had offered, I look forward to chatting with anyone about those aspirations in general or about going to law school in particular. So thank you all for inviting me to this wonderful opportunity and program.
Thank you, Dean. I really appreciate that. I want to move to Dean Gerken first, and then to Dean Mnookin. We'll go first to New York City with Dean Gerken, and then to California, since that's Pacific time.
So I'm happy to have Dean Mnookin get the last word. I'll just say very briefly, I've been really in this conversation. We're four very different schools in different places with quite different aims and so forth. And yet what unites all of us is the profession. It's an honorable profession for a change, for everyone to notice that fact. And I just want to say that those are the values that really endure, and those are the values that you'll learn no matter what life school you go to. So.
Yes, today, Dean Gerken, we appreciate that. Dean Mnookin.
Many thanks to the two of you for creating this opportunity, and to my fellow deans for being such fabulous joint interlocutors. It's such a pleasure to see all of you. Very briefly, because I know we're out of time, I'm really going to just reiterate something that's already been said. I think there's enormous power in the idea of lawyers as leaders. And I want to be careful about what we mean by that. There are many kinds of leaders. Some leaders truly are in front leading the country, but there's lots of ways to exert more quiet forms of leadership within civil society and within our nation. And as I think at least one or maybe two of my fellow deans said, when you look around, an enormous portion of the leaders in our country are law trained. And that's not an accident. I think that a law degree gives you that kind of critical thinking skill that generates opportunity if you look for it. I will also say I finished fairly recently a meeting with all of my sections, my first year sections. And one thing I heard from an enormous number of students was how law school, even the first year of law school, was a lot more fun than they expected. To be sure, some of them came in thinking it was going to be a horror story, so there may be a baseline issue. Maybe it was better than they feared, but an enormous number of them said it was much more interesting and satisfying and exciting than they'd thought it would be. And I mean, I'd like to say that's partly about my law school, but I don't really believe that. I think the process of legal education is also inherently extremely interesting to most of the people participating in it. Again, thanks so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dean Mnookin, and let me thank all the deans again. I want to turn this over to Ken Randall for a closing remark. As I do that, I want to make sure that all the candidates know that LSAC is here to help you. We're the hub for you in your enrollment journey, and we're here to help in any way we can to ease that journey and connect you to the fabulous law schools that we have here in this nation. Ken, back to you, and thank you again for enabling this program today and getting the word out about legal education.
Great. Well, thank you, Kellye. iLaw and BARBRI are delighted to join LSAC, and you and the four deans and a couple hundred people who have logged in to hear about legal education today. As iLaw BARBRI go around the country, we're seeing significant increases in students interested again in law school. And as a lifelong legal educator, that's a wonderful thing for us to see. People are interested in the improved job market. They're interested in impacting their societies, the states, the nation, and globally. So we've been delighted to be part of this. As I said at the outset, our next program will be November 5th. Thank you and good night.